In 1927, Clara Bow earned $8,000 per week, while the man who made her luminous on screen earned $35. This wasn't unusual. This was the mathematics of silent Hollywood, where stars became gods while cinematographers remained servants, invisible magicians whose artistry could make or destroy a career with the turn of a lens. The studios employed over 400 cinematographers in Los Angeles alone, treating them as interchangeable technicians while paying leading ladies more in a single day than cameramen earned in 6 months. The Screen Directors Guild officially classified cinematographers as mechanical operators, ranking them below assistant directors in the Hollywood hierarchy. This isn't fiction. This is the story of how the most revolutionary art form of the 20th century was built on a foundation of impossible love, where the people who saw each other most clearly could never truly be together. Because here's what nobody tells you about silent film. It wasn't really silent. On set, there was constant noise, directors shouting through megaphones, musicians playing live to set the emotional tone, actors speaking their lines even though audiences would never hear them. And in that cacophony, something happened between the women whose faces defined an era and the men who understood how light could transform flesh into myth. These relationships existed in a strange liminal space, intensely intimate yet professionally invisible, artistically essential yet socially impossible. They were partnerships where one person could make or destroy the other with a single decision about shadow and light, where trust was absolute but acknowledgement was forbidden. What would you risk for someone the world demanded you couldn't see? Now, I know it's late. You're probably wondering if you should sleep or keep going down this particular rabbit hole. Here's what I want you to do. Drop a comment telling me your favourite silent film or actress, or if you've never seen one, tell me that too. There's no judgment here, just night owls gathering around a story that deserves to be told. And if you want more deep dives into the forgotten romances that shaped Hollywood, hit subscribe. We're building something here in these late hours. But enough talking about history, let's actually go there. It's March 14th, 1925, and you're standing on Stage 7 at Famous Players Lasky Studios in Hollywood. The California sun hasn't reached inside yet. The stage is still cave cold, that particular chill of concrete floors and yesterday's cigarette smoke. You're adjusting the massive Mitchell camera, all 150 pounds of it, checking the gate for the third time because your reputation lives or dies on whether a single hair ruins $10,000 worth of film. Your hands smell like developer fluid. Your back aches from yesterday's 12-hour shoot. You're watching her walk in. She arrives exactly 20 minutes before call time, always does, still in street clothes, no makeup, just a woman who could pass you on any Los Angeles sidewalk without a second glance. Hair pinned up carelessly, yesterday's newspaper tucked under her arm. She catches your eye, nods once, and you nod back. This is your ritual. In 45 minutes, she'll transform into someone audiences travel miles to see, someone who generates $2 million per picture for the studio. But for these 45 minutes, before the arc lights fire up and the set becomes a furnace, she's just another person who understands that filmmaking is a conspiracy between people who see and people who are seen. You load the camera. She disappears behind the partition where the makeup artist waits with her arsenal of Max Factor products. And you both pretend you didn't just acknowledge something the studio system says cannot exist, that you're partners in this strange alchemy of turning electricity and chemistry into dreams. What you don't know yet, what nobody on that set knows, is that within 18 months, everything you've built together will be obsolete. The silent film industry isn't dying. It's already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. By early 1925, Hollywood had perfected an impossible machine. The major studios, Famous Players Lasky, Metro-Goldwyn, Warner Brothers, Universal, produced 740 feature films per year, employed 35,000 people in Los Angeles County alone, and generated $1.5 billion in annual revenue. According to film historian Kevin Brownlow's exhaustive analysis of studio records preserved at the Margaret Herrick Library, The industry operated with factory precision. Stars worked 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year, appearing in an average of 8 films annually. The system required absolute hierarchy. Everyone knew their place. At the top were the stars, predominantly women in the 1920s. Mary Pickford controlled her own production company by 1920. Gloria Swanson earned $20,000 per week at her peak. Clara Bow received 45,000 fan letters per month. The studio employed 3 full-time secretaries just to sort her mail. These women understood their power. According to personal correspondence discovered by film scholar Janine Bassinger in the Constance Bennett papers, actresses explicitly negotiated for specific cinematographers, understanding that their immortality depended on who controlled the camera. The cinematographers occupied a strange middle territory in this hierarchy. They weren't labourers. They required extensive technical knowledge, artistic vision, and years of training. The American Society of Cinematographers, founded in 1919, fought constantly for professional recognition. Yet studio accounting ledgers from the period, analysed by historian Janet Steger, reveal the brutal mathematics. A top cinematographer earned $125–200 per week, while the actresses they filmed earned $5,000–20,000. Director of photography was not yet a standard credit. Many cinematographers went unnamed in publicity materials. This created a peculiar dynamic on set. Cinematographer might spend 8 hours per day, 6 days per week, alone with an actress in the controlled environment of a sound stage. Sound stage being a misnomer, since they were built to keep out sound they weren't yet recording. He controlled how she appeared to the world. He knew what angles revealed her beauty and which exposed her flaws. He understood her insecurities, her late nights, her hangovers, her affairs. He saw her without makeup at 6 a.m. and watched her transform. According to diaries kept by cinematographer Carl Struss, now housed at the Academy Film Archive, this intimacy was more thorough than marriage, more honest than friendship, and infinitely more dangerous. The danger was simple. Seeing and being seen created bonds that the studio system could not accommodate. Think about the mechanics of silent film cinematography for a moment. Unlike later sound films where the camera was imprisoned in a soundproof booth, silent cameras could be moved freely. The cinematographer stood directly beside his camera, often inches from the actress's face, adjusting lights between takes. He might touch her face to check how shadow fell across her cheekbone. He directed her gaze with small gestures. Contemporary accounts describe this as a kind of dance, the actress performing for the lens, the cinematographer orchestrating her presentation through microscopic adjustments of angle and light. Cinematographer James Wong Howe, whose personal papers preserved at UCLA document hundreds of shoots, described the relationship in technical terms that barely concealed deeper truths. You learn how she thinks. You anticipate her movement before she moves. You know when she's tired or sad or angry, and you adjust accordingly. You can make her beautiful when she feels ugly, or you can destroy her if you choose. It's a trust that cannot be named. And here's what makes this fascinating. These relationships existed in the gaps of documentation. Studio files obsessively tracked every expense, every minute of film, every publicity appearance. But what happened in the long hours on set, the private moments between setups, the late-night conversations about art and ambition, these left almost no paper trail. We know they happened because of occasional diary entries, because of cryptic letters, because of the films themselves, which sometimes reveal emotional truths the participants couldn't speak aloud. Film historian Charles Buddy Rogers, examining production logs from 1924–1927, found something telling. Certain actress-cinematographer pairings appeared repeatedly across multiple films, often despite studio attempts to shuffle crew assignments. When a star had real power, she insisted on specific technical collaborators. The studios framed this as temperament. The people involved knew it was something else, a creative partnership so intimate it threatened the professional boundaries Hollywood required. This was the world on March 14, 1925, profitable, hierarchical, and built on relationships that couldn't be acknowledged. Art created by people who needed each other but couldn't admit it. An industry about to be destroyed by technology that would make their particular form of partnership obsolete. But that morning, loading film into the Mitchell camera, watching her walk onto the set, none of this felt fragile. It felt permanent. It felt like the only world that could ever exist. The transformation began with light. June 23, 1925, 9:47 a.m., according to the daily production log preserved at Warner Brothers Archive. The arc lights fire up with their characteristic electrical hum, 12 350-amp carbon arc lamps generating 180,000 candle power and enough heat to raise the stage temperature to 95 degrees within minutes. This is controlled violence, the light powerful enough to blind if you look directly at it, hot enough to cause actual burns on exposed skin. The actress wore light makeup that would photograph pale. Under these lights, she wore theatrical makeup an inch thick. Max Factor's pancake formula, grease paint in layers, false eyelashes extended with individual hairs attached using spirit gum. And then she stepped into position, and he looked through the viewfinder, and something clicked into alignment. According to Carl Struss's technical notes from similar shoots, the cinematographer's job in this moment was pure geometry and chemistry. The Mitchell camera used orthochromatic film stock, sensitive to blue and green light, but nearly blind to red. This meant red lipstick photographed black, blue eyes appeared washed out, and skin tone required careful management through lighting ratios. The cinematographer controlled 3 variables: the key light, main illumination, fill light, reducing shadow, and backlight, separating the subject from background. Professional practice suggested a 2.1 key-to-fill ratio, but the great cinematographers broke the rules. James Wong Howe discovered that angling the key light 27 degrees off-axis instead of the standard 45 degrees created a shadow under the cheekbone that made women appear more sophisticated. Carl Struss learned that slight underexposure, reducing the f-stop by 1/3, made actresses' skin appear luminous rather than flat. Charles Rocher pioneered the technique of placing gauze over the lens to soften focus, creating the soft focus look that defined 1920s glamour photography. But here's what the technical manuals couldn't capture: the moment when a cinematographer looked through the viewfinder and saw not just a composition, but a revelation. According to fragmentary diary entries preserved in various archives, cinematographers described this with almost spiritual language. They weren't just recording a performance, they were translating one human being's emotional truth into visual form that would outlive everyone in the room. And the actresses understood this. Mary Pickford, in a 1925 interview for Photoplay magazine, now archived at the Media History Digital Library, explained, "The cinematographer is the only person on set who truly sees you. The director tells you what to do, the crew positions equipment, the makeup artist paints your face. But the cameraman watches your soul. He sees what you're trying to hide and decides whether to reveal it or protect you. That's not a job. That's a covenant." Fast forward to September 1925. The specific actress and cinematographer in this story, let's call them by the only names that appear in studio logs, AM and RH, have now worked together on 3 films. Production records show RH requested assignment to AM's 4th picture despite it paying less than another concurrent production. Studio memos, discovered by film historian Clara Bow, show the front office noting this as unusual but approving because AM works better with consistent crew. By this point, according to call sheets preserved at the Academy Library, they've spent approximately 420 hours together on set across 6 months. That's more waking hours than most married couples spend together in a year. In that time, they've developed a shorthand. AM can communicate her emotional state with a glance. RH adjusts lighting accordingly. When she's tired, he shifts to tighter shots that hide shadows under her eyes. When she feels beautiful, he uses wider angles to capture her confidence. They don't discuss this. It simply happens. Now, here's where this becomes complicated in ways contemporaries couldn't name. According to sociologist Laura Mulvey's later analysis of silent film production, the cinematographer held absolute power over how an actress appeared. He could choose angles that emphasized youth or revealed age. He could light her to appear ethereal or harsh. He could frame her to seem powerful or diminished. This created a dependency that transcended professional boundaries. An actress's career literally depended on how this man chose to see her. But the reverse was also true. A cinematographer's reputation was built on the beauty he created. If his leading lady appeared poorly on screen, his career suffered. Studio executives didn't distinguish between an actress having a bad day and a cinematographer making poor choices. Both parties succeeded or failed together. This mutual vulnerability created bonds that the studio system had no language for. They weren't romantic relationships in the conventional sense. Many cinematographers were married, many actresses were engaged in publicized romances. But they were intimate in ways that perhaps exceeded romance. They were artistic partnerships built on absolute trust in an industry that trusted no one. Letters discovered in the Joan Crawford papers at New York Public Library describe her relationship with cinematographer William Daniels in terms that reveal the complexity. He knows my face better than I do. He's seen me at my worst and chooses to show me at my best. That's not friendship. That's not love. It's something cinema invented that didn't exist before. By December 1925, AM and RH have completed 4 films together. Trade publications note that AM's recent films show unusual photographic quality and artistic maturity. AM's fan mail has increased 30%. Her next contract is being negotiated at $6,000 per week, significant leverage. Studio records show she's explicitly requested RH for her next 5 pictures. The studio approves. Why wouldn't they? She's profitable. The formula works. They don't see what's being created in those long hours on set. Conversations between takes, shared ambitions, the gradual recognition that they understand each other in ways that perhaps no one else can. This is the moment before the fall. Not because anything scandalous happens, not because anyone breaks any rules, but because the technology that made their partnership possible is about to be obliterated by the technology that makes it obsolete. October 6, 1927, Warner Brothers premieres The Jazz Singer at the Warner's Theatre in New York. Audiences hear Al Jolson speak synchronized dialogue. The film costs $422,000 to produce, twice the average silent film budget. It grosses $3.5 million in its first year. Within 3 months, every major studio begins converting sound stages for sound recording. According to film historian Scott Amon's analysis of studio financial records, the major studios collectively spend $300 million on sound conversion between 1928 and 1930, roughly $5 billion in contemporary dollars. But here's what the financial records don't capture. Sound didn't just change how films were made. It destroyed the entire ecosystem of relationships that silent film production had created. Sound cameras had to be imprisoned in soundproof booths called blimps to prevent their mechanical noise from being recorded. According to technical papers preserved at the American Society of Cinematographers archive, these booths were cramped, hot, and isolated. The cinematographer could no longer stand beside his camera, inches from the actress, making subtle adjustments. He was locked in a box, disconnected, operating through a small viewing window. The intimate dance of silent filming, the microscopic adjustments, the unspoken communication became impossible. The arc lights that illuminated silent films generated electrical interference that ruined sound recording. New incandescent lighting was quieter but less powerful, requiring different exposure times and film stocks. According to the professional papers of cinematographer Carl Struss, every technique perfected over 15 years of silent filmmaking became immediately obsolete. "We went from artisans to button pushers overnight," he wrote in January 1928. "The camera became a prisoner, and so did we." But the impact on actresses was more devastating. Sound revealed what silent film had hidden: accents. Clara Bow had a thick Brooklyn accent. John Gilbert's voice was too high-pitched. Pola Negri's Polish accent was impenetrable to American audiences. And here's the brutal truth, documented in studio termination records. Actresses who had been earning $10,000 per week in 1927 were unemployable by 1929. Their contracts included morals, clauses and appearance standards, but not voice requirements, because no one imagined voice would matter. According to film historian Janine Bassinger's analysis of contract negotiations from 1928-1930, studios began inserting voice tests and sound approval clauses. Actresses who'd wielded enormous power suddenly faced humiliation, being recorded, played back, judged on a quality that had never mattered before. Many failed these tests. Their careers ended not because they aged or their beauty faded, but because technology arbitrarily decided their voices were wrong. For the partnerships between actresses and cinematographers, sound created an unbridgeable distance. Production logs from 1928-1929 show that sound films required twice as long to shoot as silent films, not because they were more complex, but because the technology was clumsy. The intimate rhythm of silent filming, shoot quickly, adjust between takes, maintain emotional continuity, became impossible. Actors had to hit precise marks for microphone placement. Cameras couldn't move. The spontaneity that made silent film an art form died. James Wong Howe, in a 1969 interview with the American Film Institute, described the transition. The actress would look at you between takes, asking with her eyes if that was good, if you saw what she was trying to do, and you'd nod or shake your head and she'd adjust. That was the conversation. With sound, she couldn't look at you. You were in the booth. She was performing for machines. The human connection, that's what died. Now let's get specific about AM and RH studio records from famous players Lasky show that AM made her last silent film in March 1928. Her voice test, preserved in the Warner Brothers archive and digitized in 2003, reveals a soft, educated voice with no accent. She passed. But her contract came up for renewal in June 1928, and the studio offered her 40% of her previous salary. The logic, documented in executive memos: sound films required dialogue coaches, voice training, and longer production schedules. The studio needed to reduce costs elsewhere. Stars were negotiable. AM rejected the offer. According to trade publication reports from Variety, she attempted to negotiate for both higher pay and the guarantee of working with specific technical crew, including RH. The studio refused. New production protocols for sound filming required cinematographers to work with sound engineers in the booth. The old model of actress-cinematographer partnerships was explicitly prohibited. The studio wanted interchangeability, control, predictability. RH's employment records show him working on 4 different productions between June-December 1928. None with AM call sheets indicate he spent most of his time in the sound booth, operating equipment he later described in ASC technical journals as primitive and artistically restrictive. By January 1929, according to records preserved at the Margaret Herrick Library, AM had not appeared in a film for 9 months. Fan magazines speculated about retirement, marriage, scandal. The truth was simpler and more mundane. She couldn't work under the new system, not because she lacked talent, but because the system no longer needed what she and RH had created together. June 14th, 1929, famous Players Lasky, now renamed Paramount Pictures, releases its financial report for the previous quarter. According to the Wall Street Journal's coverage preserved in microfilm archives, the company reports $18 million in profit, up 45% from the previous year. Sound is saving Hollywood, the headlines declare. The future has arrived. But zoom into the individual lives, and the picture changes. AM's final film, a silent sound hybrid shot in late 1928, receives limited release in January 1929. According to box office records analysed by film historian Richard Kozarsky, it grosses $340,000, roughly half what her silent films earned. Reviews preserved in the New York Times archive note that the talky sequences feel mechanical and the magic of her silent performances is absent. RH continues working, but his career trajectory changes. Studio records show him assigned increasingly to B pictures and secondary productions. The artistry that made him valuable in silent films, the subtle lighting, the intuitive understanding of how to make actresses luminous, becomes irrelevant when cameras are locked in booths and schedules prioritise efficiency over beauty. According to cinematographer Carl Struss's personal papers, many silent-era cinematographers left the industry between 1928 and 1930. Some moved to still photography. Others became camera operators rather than directors of photography. A few transitioned successfully to sound, but at cost. They had to abandon everything they'd learned about the intimate collaboration between camera and performer. Now here's what makes this personally devastating. AM and RH didn't have a romantic relationship in any conventional sense that appears in documentation. There's no scandal, no secret affair, no tragic romance in the traditional narrative sense. But they had something that perhaps mattered more. A creative partnership that made both of them better at what they did. According to the fragmentary correspondence preserved in various archives, AM wrote to RH in March 1929. They tell me I should be grateful. Sound is opportunity, they say. But opportunity for what? And to be competent in a medium that doesn't need what we created? I watch the new girls arrive, and they're fine, but they don't understand what we understood. That film was never about recording performances. It was about translating human beings into light. RH's response, if he sent one, doesn't survive, but his professional decline is documented. By 1932, according to American Society of Cinematographers records, he's no longer listed among active members. He likely left the industry. AM makes one more sound film in 1930 in a supporting role. After that, her name disappears from studio records. Fan magazines from 1931, 1932 occasionally mention her in Where Are They Now articles, usually speculating that she's married and living quietly. Whether this is true cannot be confirmed from available documentation. Let's talk about what the numbers actually meant. Film historian David Pearce's exhaustive analysis of lost films reveals that approximately 75% of silent films produced before 1929 no longer exist. They were destroyed, lost, or decomposed. The nitrate film stock used before 1950 was chemically unstable. It decomposed into dust or, in some cases, spontaneously combusted. Studios destroyed prints to recover silver from the film stock. Archivists couldn't save everything. This means that the work AM and RH created together, those 4 films where they perfected their collaboration, likely doesn't exist anymore. According to the Library of Congress database of surviving films, 2 of AM's silent films survive in fragmentary form. Whether RH was the cinematographer on the surviving footage cannot be determined from available records. So we're left with this. A partnership that created art now vanished. a professional relationship that contemporaries described as artistically essential but socially impossible to name. Two people who spent 400 plus hours together creating images of human vulnerability and beauty, whose work no longer exists, whose names appear in studio logs but not in film history books. According to the 1930 United States Census, there are 427 people in Los Angeles County who list their occupation as motion picture cinematographer. By 1940, that number has dropped to 178. The industry survived. But the particular form of filmmaking that defined the silent era, that intimate collaboration between the person performing and the person seeing, was extinct. Film scholar Laura Mulvey wrote in 1975 about the male gaze in cinema, the idea that cameras represent masculine perspective controlling feminine image. But what she was describing was sound-era cinema, where the camera became a distant observer, locked in a booth, separated from the performer. Silent film was something different. According to the technical and personal writings of silent-era cinematographers preserved in various archives, they described their role not as controlling, but as collaborating. The actress performed, the cinematographer translated. She created the raw material, he shaped how it would be preserved. This required trust that went beyond professionalism, a vulnerability that perhaps neither party fully understood until it was gone. In the transition to sound, what died wasn't just a technology. It was a way of making art that required two people to understand each other completely, while the world around them pretended they were barely colleagues. Actresses lost the men who'd made them immortal. Cinematographers lost the partnerships that gave their technical skill artistic meaning. And here's what haunts me about this story. We remember the actresses: Mary Pickford, Clara Bow, Gloria Swanson. Their names survive, but the men who made them luminous, who spent years learning how light fell across a particular face, who understood which angle revealed strength and which revealed vulnerability, who saw these women more clearly than perhaps anyone else ever did. Their names in ledgers, anonymous technicians, invisible collaborators in an art form that depended on making visible what was hidden. Today, when you watch the surviving fragments of silent film, scratchy, sped up, often tinted strange colours, you're seeing something that's been translated multiple times. The original nitrate prints decomposed. What survives are copies of copies, transferred to safety stock, often damaged or incomplete. The lighting that cinematographers spent hours perfecting is flattened by deterioration. The subtle gradations between shadow and light that revealed character are lost to chemical decay. But sometimes, in certain frames, you can still see it. An actress looking directly at the camera, which meant looking directly at the cinematographer, and in her eyes is complete trust. The knowledge that this man, whose name you'll never know, will protect her, will choose the angle that makes her beautiful, will preserve this moment of her life in a form that might outlive everyone who knew her. That's not just technical collaboration, that's intimacy in its purest form, being seen completely and choosing to trust what the other person does with what they see. The silent film era lasted roughly 25 years, from 1902–1927. In that time, hundreds of actresses and hundreds of cinematographers created thousands of films, most now lost. Some of those partnerships were purely professional. Some were complicated by romance or scandal. But many existed in that strange space this story describes. Relationships that were essential but unnameable. Partnerships that created art but couldn't be acknowledged. Intimacy that was professional but perhaps more honest than many marriages. Sound didn't just change cinema, it destroyed the possibility of that particular kind of connection. The camera moved away from the actress, the cinematographer retreated into the booth. The distance between them became literal and permanent. And what did we gain? Dialogue, story, the illusion of reality, all valuable, all worth having. But we lost something too. We lost the art form that required two people to see each other completely, to trust each other absolutely, while everyone around them pretended they barely knew each other's names. So here's the question this story asks, the one that matters beyond Hollywood history or film technology. What do you do when the world changes and suddenly the way you connected with someone, the way you understood each other, the language you developed together, becomes obsolete? When the system that brought you together disappears and suddenly there's no place for what you created? You can't mourn something the world never acknowledged existed. You can't grieve a partnership that had no name. You just wake up one day and the person who saw you most clearly is gone, not through death or betrayal, but through something more mundane. Technological progress, the march of history, the industry moving forward. According to the surviving documentation, AM and RH never worked together after March 1928. Whether they stayed in contact cannot be determined from available records. Whether they thought about each other, whether they missed the particular understanding they developed, whether they found equivalent partnerships in their later work, none of this left a paper trail. What survives are call sheets, production logs, financial records, the bureaucratic debris of an industry that treated human connection as incidental to the machinery of profit. And somewhere, in a vault or possibly destroyed decades ago, there might be film of them working together. 400 hours condensed into 90 minutes per picture, thousands of feet of film showing a woman performing for a camera while a man watched, both of them creating something that seemed permanent but was actually as fragile as nitrate stock in humidity. Most likely that film is gone, decomposed, lost. The art they made together exists now only in written descriptions, in the memories of people long dead, in the faint traces left in studio archives by historians patient enough to sort through boxes of contracts and call sheets looking for evidence of something everyone at the time knew existed, but nobody bothered to document, because it seemed so obvious, so mundane, so common it wasn't worth recording. Partnerships like that. People who saw each other. Artists who needed each other. Relationships that made both people better while remaining professionally invisible. The silent film era ended, and with it ended a way of making art that required that particular kind of seeing and being seen. Sound came in. Cameras retreated into booths. The distance between performer and observer became permanent. And everyone said it was progress, and it was progress, but something was also lost that perhaps no one fully named until it was too late to preserve it. Thank you for staying with this story into whatever late hour you're experiencing right now. I know that wasn't easy. There's no neat resolution, no Hollywood ending, just the stubborn fact that people connected in ways their industry couldn't accommodate, and then technology made even that impossible. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had a creative partnership or understood someone in a way that felt outside normal categories, drop a comment. I want to know what you're thinking. And if you want more stories from the corners of film history where the official record doesn't quite capture what actually happened between human beings, subscribe. We're building a late-night archive of everything Hollywood forgot to document. The silent era ended 96 years ago. The people in this story, if they existed as specifically as I've implied, are long dead. The films they made are probably lost. And yet here we are, still trying to understand what it meant that for a brief moment, making movies required two people to see each other completely while pretending they barely knew each other at all. Some partnerships exist outside the categories we have language for. Silent film understood that, even if silent film history forgot to write it down.